Let's move on to, we have two book talks that are going to conclude the conference. And I'd like to introduce the next book talk here, which is about a book called Reading Sri Aurobindo. And this book talk is going to be chaired by Bindu Puri, and she'll be joined by Reetu Jaiswal, Dipika Bhatia, and Devashish Banerjee. And I'll just say a little bit about everybody before we get going. Bindu Puri is a professor of contemporary Indian philosophy at the Center for Philosophy, School of Social Sciences, Nehru University in India. Her areas of interest are contemporary Indian philosophy and in moral and political philosophy. She has published over 40 research papers in philosophical and interdisciplinary journals of international repute and edited anthologies. She has published 6 edited books and authored 2 monographs, Gandhi and the Moral Life, and the Tagore-Gandhi Debate on matters of truth and untruth. Dr. Reetu Jaiswal is a senior assistant professor at the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi since 2015. Her areas of interest include social and political philosophy, gender studies, and media studies. Among various publications, recently published works are Journalistic Responsibility in the Age of Commercialism, Injustice and Responsibility, Relearning to be Human, published by the Council for Research in Philosophy, Washington, D.C. A Gandhian Solution to the Problem of Religious Intolerance in Rethinking Religious Pluralism, and Understanding Aurobindo's Concept of Nationalism and Integral Philosophy or a Religious Faith in Reading Sri Aurobindo. She has been conferred with the Gandhi Award from Gandhi Bhawan, University of Delhi. She has been a visiting faculty at IIM Rohtak in 2021 and 2023. She is a mentor of MAP, an international network of students that aims at addressing issues of inclusivity and minority participation in philosophy. And we have Dipika Bhatia, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Philosophy, Indraprastha College for Women, University of Delhi. She completed her PhD in philosophy from Center for Philosophy, School of Social Sciences at Nehru University. Her primary research interests are in the field of moral philosophy, meta-ethical studies, moral psychology, and philosophy of emotion. She's also interested in the field of continental philosophy, philosophy of mind, and feminist studies. Dr. Bhatia has presented research papers in national and international conferences and has published articles to her credit. She is the author of the paper, The Phenomena of Emotions in Indian Philosophical System, Summer Reflections, in the Journal of Dharma Studies, and Moral Luck, a Philosophical Problem, in the Journal of Indian Council of Philosophical Research. Her current research work concerns the philosophical examination of the relation between morality and emotions. And we've met Devashish Banerjee already in this conference, and I think that I won't read his bio, but we should maybe continue on with the book talk.
Can you see my screen, which I'm sharing?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, great. So should I start with the talk now?
Yes, please.
Wonderful. So I'm just would like to begin really by thanking the Department, of Asian Contemplative and Transcultural Studies for having invited us over here to talk about the book Reading Sri Aurobindo, Metaphysics, Ethics and Spirituality. And this book, which I'm trying to show on the screen, has a wonderful collection of essays, including by Professor Devashish Banerjee, who I'd like to very specially thank both for the really wonderful paper and for this present invitation. And, the 8 parts of this book, 17 essays, deal with different aspects of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, as the name suggests. Um, Metaphysical, epistemological, ethical, spiritual, and individual essays explain, discuss Sri Aurobindo's relationship to a Vedantic metaphysics, his theory of evolution, ethics of self-transcendence. I mean, I think it was brought out very beautifully in just, the previous presentation. The revival of the quest for immortality in the famous poem Savitri, integral yoga, views on the state, nation, ideal of philosophy, and how human beings can rethink and transform knowledge, language, self, society, and state. So, this book really talks about all these different things through individual essays. And then we have Professor Banerjee's very wonderful paper on postmodernism and Sri Aurobindo, where he initiates a discussion on the features of postmodernity, cultural postmodernism, philosophical postmodernism, and he assesses the philosophy and praxis of Sri Aurobindo against those features. And he places Sri Aurobindo as a predecessor of postmodernism. And it's interesting here that while Sri Aurobindo's lifespan, 1872 to 1950, is seen to coincide with modernity, Professor Banerjee considers his views in terms of an epistemic shift from modernism to postmodernism. In itself, this many natured philosophical interest in Sri Aurobindo is enough to explain how very relevant he is to our times and how much the Indian universities and academic syllabi have lost by postponing a consideration and attention to his philosophy. Uh, as we initiate, I think, this discussion, we should just kind of recall or acknowledge the absent presence of Sri Aurobindo himself here amongst us and on this platform and in the book as being the inspiration for all these reflections. I think it's very appropriate to speak about this book, Reading Sri Aurobindo, given that this conference is intimately related to, or rather speaks about, sustainability and contemplative civilization. Because if you look at the 8 sections and 17 essays in the book, they unpack the integral vision of Sri Aurobindo. And they bring out the manner in which that vision makes for an alternative relationship with the cosmos, one that calls for individual and collective transformation and makes for sustainability. As I have attempted to argue in the basically, I'm also trying to show you, a few slides over here. I've tried to argue in the introduction to the book that if one accepts, modern scientific accounts of evolution, one accepts an anthropocentric position, as most people do, where the human species is the best in a hierarchical series of being. And this leads to the notion that there's justification for the human species to use the rest of creation for the survival of the human race. Now, it's interesting that Sri Aurobindo gave a different account of evolution, coming here close to his friend, Rabindranath Tagore, who also spoke about evolution in The Religion of Man. Though, of course, his theory of evolution was not so well worked out as Sri Aurobindo's. But Sri Aurobindo's account made for a serious theoretical shift, with room for respect for material nature and for non-human beings. Of course, the practical significance of such a shift is more or less obvious in the present context, because he could move human beings away from a self-occupied position at the center of the cosmos and towards a concern with nature and beings other than humans. And in the Life Divine, he explains, we speak of the evolution of life in matter, the evolution of mind in matter, but evolution is a word which merely states the phenomenon without explaining it. For there seems to be no reason why life should evolve out of material elements or mind out of living forms unless we accept the Vedantic solution that life is already involved in matter. Sorry. I think there was some garbled speech over there. So I was saying that Sri Aurobindo's understanding that life emerges out of matter and mind out of life is not only significant because it challenges anthropocentrism of modern evolutionary accounts, but also because it suggests that there is a comradeship in evolution between nature or matter and spirit or mind. So this is really, I think, comes out very well in the book, where, part one, there is an account of evolution in the paper of Professor Prasad. And then you have two papers by Raghunath Ghosh and Nishant Kumar bringing out how an understanding of the yogic path can harmonize both an individual self-transformation and that of society. And there is different papers trying to get this across. And of course, there is the centrality of the poem we heard in the previous presentation, Savitri, which Sri Aurobindo wrote across his entire life between 1916 and 1946. And, it changes the way that one might look at the rest of the cosmos apart from man. Of course, on the face of it, Savitri is a story which is from the Mahabharata, and it speaks about how Savitri brings back her husband to earth from the clutches of Yam, the god of death. But in Sri Aurobindo's poetry, he explains that he used Savitri as a method of ascension. He began on a certain level, and then I'm just quoting from him, each time I could reach a higher level, I rewrote from that level. And he also, explains the power of poetry as a revealer of hidden truths, having the power to make affirmations of divinity and subsequent transformations within human beings. And these transformations actually transform your relationships to the non-human cosmos and thereby make for sustainability. And it's very interesting over here how he, in the author's note, he speaks about Savitri. And I've brought up this in the introduction to the book. The tale of Satyavan and Savitri is recited in the Mahabharata as a story of conjugal love conquering death. But this legend is one of the many symbolic myths of the Vedic cycle. Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. Asvapati, the lord of the horse, her human father, is the lord of tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes. Dyumatsena, lord of the shining hosts, father of Satyavan, is the divine mind, here fallen blind, losing its celestial kingdom of vision, and through that loss its kingdom of glory. Still, this is not a mere allegory. The characters are not personified qualities, but incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch. And they take human bodies in order to help man and show him the way from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and an immortal life. So one might also understand why Sri Aurobindo's philosophy could have made, so much more of an effective contribution to this kind of transformed perspective and sustainability than the Advait, which also talks about oneness of all being. And here, of course, is the powerful consideration that he chose to employ the idea of Leela or play than that of cosmic evolution. Of cosmic illusion, to express the relationship between the absolute and the natural world. The term becomes significant if you want to take the world seriously. And he basically is able to do this and effect a philosophical reconciliation between his own understanding of the absolute and his faith in the possibility of the transformation of earth nature and of the human self's acquisition of divine like qualities while remaining within such earth nature, because he thinks and he believes and explains that the divine as Satchit Anand takes the poise of the absolute at the moment of creation, but that's not the only poise. He speaks actually about three such general poises. The first founds the inalienable unity of things, the second modifies the unity to support the manifestation of the many in one and the one in many, and the third modifies it so as to support the evolution of a diversified individuality. So the guiding light or insight of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is kind of quite compatible with the idea that Brahman as the absolute can go along with the idea that earth is real and a manifestation of the divine. And this is, of course, brought out at its best in Savitri, where Savitri debates with Yam, a remote, uncaring god who doomed to his not the illusory note. And here you see Yam commands Savitri that will you keep your passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass. And you see how Savitri rejects Yam's commands with arguments. He's saying that our lives are God's messengers beneath the stars. To dwell under death's shadow have they come, tempting God's light to earth for the ignorant race, his love to fill the hollow in men's heart, his bliss to heal the unhappiness of the world. So love must not cease to live upon the earth. So unlike T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, with which Savitri has often been brought together, Savitri closes with this thought of eternal felicity and here Sri Aurobindo kind of affirms the possibility of actualizing divinity on earth or divinizing human and non-human existence on the earth and making for a transformed relationship with the non-human world. Now, when I was, writing this book and when I was listening to the previous speaker, we need to kind of reflect upon the possibility that skepticism might arise and make for arguments that seek to say that this wonderful vision cannot really be actualized and is irrelevant to the times in which we live. And so the aspirational ideal which Sri Aurobindo puts forth might not really be something that people can achieve. So I have in the introduction to the book spoken about meeting the skepticism by 4 reflections, which I'll just briefly kind of summarize. One, skepticism about this kind of complete fulfillment of Sri Aurobindo's aspirational ideal of transforming human and material nature should be tempered by the thought that absolutely all moral and self-transformative ideals are aspirational in the same way, and in that sense can only be progressively realized. Think about Kant's Kingdom of Ends. Secondly, his interest in the possibility of the evolution of earth material nature and faith in the absolute reality of Brahman serves an important and practical purpose in our times, that of making space for respect for the natural world in what is essentially a human centered world. Third, this idea, the ideal of the descent of the supermind, is a collective rather than a purely individual ideal. And this can serve to bring about a much needed shift of attention to collective rather than to only individual well being. Lastly, we can, philosophically, uh, Sri Aurobindo has brought out the need to have a more complete understanding of human nature, one that countenances the possibility that the human being is more than a body with a reason and a will. And this expanded understanding of human nature becomes relevant to our times, given the need for answers to the question, why should I be moral or good? Which question has not really been answered very effectively, given the crisis in moral motivation. So his more comprehensive understanding of human nature is very, very relevant to our times. So I think we can reflect upon why his philosophy not only serves to mitigate the charge of utopianism, but also serves lots of contemporary concerns. And one way that you can look at how he was interested in practical concerns is, of course, the speech, The Five Dreams, which is so often thought about, which he delivered on 15th August 1947, where he spoke about the Committee of Nations, who have untold potentialities, and link that with the birthday of free India. And in the Five Dreams, he not only spoke about India, but also the liberation of Asia, the rise of a great, nobler life for mankind, and, of a new step in evolution. So, certainly, he was interested in a lot of, practical changes, in transformation, and there's a lot that we can learn to change our relationship with the cosmos to realize a great and nobler life. So, just to end, I'd like to, since I've been talking about transformation, sustainability, and a contemplative civilization, I'd like to close with lines from the epilogue of Sri Aurobindo's poem Savitri, which is here on your screen, because this is just wonderful, where Savitri says that to feel love and oneness is to live, and this magic of our golden change is all the truth I know or seek, O sage. So that's really from me and from the introduction to this book, wonderful set of essays. And I'm really honored to welcome here the other three panelists who have contributed wonderful papers to three different sections in the book. So I think it'll be lovely if Professor Banerjee can open this with his, wonderful, very, very wonderful paper, which I think is such an original contribution to studies in Sri Aurobindo. So,
thank you so much, Dr. Puri. That was really illuminating. Actually, I just recently received a PDF of the book, and so I had the signal pleasure of beginning to read the book. And it will be wonderful if people can get hold of the book, because I think it's such a rich feast of research and thinking, contemporary thinking into Sri Aurobindo. It's really interesting that there's two books called Reading Sri Aurobindo that came out at the same time.
yeah.
And yeah, we discussed the other one yesterday, which is really an attempt to look at the texts of Sri Aurobindo and provide some kind of a context to the texts. but this one actually looks at the various types of directions or areas that Sri Aurobindo can open up for us today. So it's very significant and wonderful work that Dr. Puri has done. Um, yeah, I think there's a link there, and actually we had the flyer out during the conference, and there is a 20% discount on the book, which is offered. Um, all who are interested can actually reach out maybe to Jonathan, and if they give their emails, we can send them the details on how to access the book with its 20% discount. So as Dr. Puri mentioned, actually repeatedly, and in a humbling way, um, I wrote an article for this book, which is the text version of a paper I read that Dr. Puri, in a conference Dr. Puri had organized at the I think at the center, Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Delhi.
Ashram in Delhi.
Right. And so this paper was called Postmodernism and Sri Aurobindo. And as Dr. Puri has already pointed out, it tries to look at Sri Aurobindo. You see, he is a figure that stands in between, I'd say, the fountainhead of contemporary philosophy in the West, which is Friedrich Nietzsche, who is really a senior contemporary of Sri Aurobindo. Their lives overlap. And then the next person who actually opens the gates to postmodern philosophy, that's Martin Heidegger. So Sri Aurobindo occupies, they're both one is a senior contemporary and the other is a junior contemporary of Sri Aurobindo. And people don't read Sri Aurobindo that much uh, as far as these ideas are concerned, but one might find all these ideas there. I point out firstly, the first part of my article, I'm trying to talk about postmodernity as the condition of our times. What is postmodernity? And postmodernity is related to modernity, which is the age in which, we find ourselves um, as colonized people. You see, it starts in the West, it starts at a certain point in time historically, um, and it starts with a certain kind of a mission. It's almost like a religious mission to make the world modern. And by modern is meant, in a sense, rational and Western. It's the image of the Western rational man that dominates our age. And so we find that gets normalized and universalized through colonialism. And there is a certain kind of an assumption to the age. The assumption of the age is that we will all turn modern. See, we will all become, as they say, mimic white men. All the world will become similar. We will, and to some extent, we have become modern across the world. Similar people wearing the same kinds of clothes, uh, saying the same kinds of things, having the same kinds of objectives in life, the same types of ideas of happiness and pursuits of what makes life livable. But at the same time, you see, from the 1960s or so, this big wave of turning the world into a single type of human encountered its others. And these others weren't going away. So essentially, the idea of postmodernity begins from looking at the fact that what is going to happen to these others that are posing this kind of a difficulty of assimilation in the trajectory of modernity. So one idea would be that it's all okay. It's just a matter of time. We just have to exert our pressure over, you know, our time period, and gradually everybody will fall into the wave of technocratic capitalism and become its subjects, and happy subjects. So that, and liberal democracy, the neoliberal globalization project will take over completely, and we'll all be its obedient subjects. That's one view. um, the other view is that it doesn't really matter. People can have their differences, and in a way, it's really good because those differences become different flavors for consumption in a world market. See, so you have many kinds of cultural norms, and they become tasty, exotic flavors for the Western man, and then for also all other humans who start then looking at the entire world like a supermarket where you can buy whatever commodity you want. And our existences are also like that. We encounter people, it's a kind of a happy space, a flavorful and tasty space of the one. See, so that's a second view of postmodernity. Postmodernity is that space. That's many kinds of anachronisms coexist. Many kinds of cultural doxa coexist. And then the third is that the differences don't go away. They actually start multiplying, and they start showing uncomfortable and unassimilable edges, and ultimately turn very hostile. And you have an age of culture wars. And ultimately, that makes life unsustainable. It really tears the fabric of our togetherness. And we start finding all kinds of, entrenched identities, identity politics, which are each one of them making their claim, and making their claim to, in the same way as modernity tried to hegemonize the world. They want their world. See, and interestingly, if we look at these scenarios, all three of them coexist in our times. We are, to some extent, constantly reiterating the rhetoric of the technological superiority and success of our world. Everything that goes wrong, there will be a solution. The corporations will come and save us, right? On the other hand, the the universal flavors of difference in the world are multiplying into a world market that we consume all the time, assuming our modern oneness. And the inconvenient culture wars of our times are increasing and becoming almost, to the point where we are in the thick of a possible third world war. So this is the postmodern condition, and so this postmodernity and postmodernism is addressing the question of how do we live in this world and what are we to make of it. So I would say that there is a problematic of modernity. Modernity has a certain kind of a problem to be solved within it, which is expressing through these trajectories. The problematic of modernity is one of attempting a unity, but actually needing to engage with pluralism. So, can we find a plane where the one and the infinite can coexist, where they're the same, where they're the same? And this kind of an idea is, I would hold, Sri Aurobindo's view of the future. This is the view of another consciousness, because the mind, these are opposites, these are contradictions. Our age has exacerbated these contradictions to the point that these contradictions are, unsolvable realities of our time. And Sri Aurobindo is saying that the solution to it is to find a consciousness that does not hold itself within this law of the excluded middle. In other words, they are not contradictions, they are the same. just like the idea of the Brahman is the same. Infinity is not reducible to the one. It is the one. The absolute one is radically infinite. It can't be contained by some one. So, in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to say. I'd say that Sri Aurobindo's philosophy empowers two things that are at the heart of postmodernism as a philosophical construct. One is the power of becoming over the power of a static being. Time and becoming has always been a scary thing for the human. We've always tried to escape from it. Buddhism begins by saying life is suffering and transience is what makes it suffering. So, can we get out of the transience? Can we find something which does not change, the changeless? And one of the tenets of postmodernism is let us embrace change, let us embrace the becoming. The becoming is more important than some static being, because in the name of a static being, it is so easy for us to reduce things and make them into some kind of version of the one. See? And so that is one. And the other is to empower pluralism over, again, some sort of identity that can contain everything. I mean, to claim that, I mean, there's an interesting joke, a political joke about the nationalist period. And Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah said, I'm a Muslim. And Mahatma Gandhi said, I'm a Hindu and a Christian and a Jew and a Muslim. And Jinnah said, only a Hindu can say that. So this is a kind of a little joke about a certain construct or understanding of something that includes everything. And this notion of inclusion is problematic. Notion of anything that includes everything is problematic. It's only when we actually, I mean, it's really at its heart a subtle fascism. So it's only when we can arrive at another plane where the infinite is the one is the infinite, without name, without identity. See? And that, in a sense, I would say, is the postmodern project of Sri Aurobindo. And in that sense, I don't want to say more, but except for the fact that I bring into this essay the principal ideas of some of the principal postmodern thinkers and try to show how the project of Sri Aurobindo converges with many of their views on things. Thanks.
Indeed, that was such a wonderful presentation of a wonderful paper, and I think it was such a original effort and so valuable for students of Sri Aurobindo to be able to so locate him in this discourse. And I'd like to ask, moving to a very different section of the book now, I'd like to ask Ritu to speak about her paper, which comes in I think, in a totally different section on political philosophy.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And once again, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here, and Professor Bindu Puri for giving me the opportunity to participate and contribute in the writings of this huge and very great volume on Sri Aurobindo. The chapter which I have written is primarily based on the concept of nationalism, Sri Aurobindo's concept of nationalism. So the chapter is looking into this issue that generally the way Sri Aurobindo has presented his philosophy, that is supposedly an integral one. And that also reflects in his concept of nationalism and nation as well. But at the same time, we have seen that how he has tried to uh, present the notion of Bharat Mata and the notion of nation as a Shakti, as a mother, the mother. So that also comes from his context as a Bengali Hindu. Okay. So can we say that, in the name of trying to present an integral philosophy, he was rather trying to adhere to his religious faith? Okay, so it was not inclusive of the other religious affiliations, and the concept of motherhood in for the nation he has tried to build here was really very exclusive. Okay, so that is a question which I have tried to raise through this chapter. And in order to present my perspective, I have started with the discussion on the notion of nationalism, because the way nationalism has been portrayed by the Western thinkers mostly, that becomes really very mechanical, in the sense of relating yourself to a piece of land sometimes, and then a particular culture, and then trying to build that sort of mass consciousness on the basis of your feelings towards that land. But Sri Aurobindo is trying to present a very different interpretation of the concept of nationalism, which is really very spiritual in nature. Sometimes it become very religious as well, but at the same time, it also tries to include the notion of humanity in itself. So basically, the way he has tried to raise the mass consciousness among Indian people regarding the notions of nation and nationalism, that is really very uh, really very, I would like to say, very different from the perspective which is given by other people. So if we look at his concept, we'll see that his notion of nationalism is very much influenced by his notion of religion, humanity, and morality. And sometimes we see that there is some kind of overlap between the notions of nation, nationalism, religion, and spirituality. So, the point which I'm trying to pose here is that he is trying to go against the limited and negative interpretation of the feeling of nationalism, which people at that time used to think that nationalism has emerged in India because of the oppression they were facing with the British rule. So basically, he is saying that no, it is not the byproduct of this kind of oppression, but rather we should look at it from a different perspective. And he said that it should be revered as a divinely appointed Shakti of the eternal, and must do its God given work before it returns to the bosom of universal energy from which it came. So basically, it is divine. The nation and nationalism's feeling is not something which is the byproduct of any kind of oppression, according to him, but rather it is something which was already there and we need to realize it. That is the perspective. But at the same time, he was saying that if you're trying to build the notion of nation and nationalism, realize it, you cannot do it with the way British is treating you, or with the sort of rules and regulations they are imposing on you. So we will have to we can't be dependent on their mercy. So he refuted the gradual deliverance of political power in the hands of Indians, and advocated the radical belief that the British rule should be abolished at any rate. But he was aware that people were not ready for this kind of sacrifice and faith which was needed for such an act. So he said that they will have to come out of their tamasic state. So in this part of the paper, I have tried to present that how people at that time were suffering from this kind of sense of inferiority, okay, which could be understood in terms of being in the state of tamas. So Sri Aurobindo was trying to evoke this kind of feeling in people, that our actual enemy is not any force exterior to ourselves, but our own crying weakness and our cowardice and our selfishness, our hypocrisy and purblind sentimentalism. So basically, when he is trying to talk about freedom, he's not just limiting himself to the notion of political freedom, but rather trying to say that we will have to come up with the notion of spiritual freedom as well, which is to transcend your state of tamas, enter into the state of rajas, and then move towards the state of sattva. So how will we do that? That if we are already in the state of tamas, we are not able to do anything because we are loaded with the sense of inferiority. So he was trying to invoke the faith towards the mother nation, so that you can feel it. He also tried to focus on the sort of injustice which was done by the British. so that people can realize it and they can come to the level of rajas, so that they can be active, they can actively get involved into the act and do something for that, so that by doing it, ultimately they will be able to fight against the evil. So it was to fight against the inertia and the sense of enslavement which people were dealing with at that time. So by saying that, he says that with this kind of action, we can move to the state of sattva, which is the state of love for our mother. So in this way, he very beautifully tries to sublimate our energies from tamas to rajas and ultimately to sattva, in order to get us out of the state of slavery. And that is the integral part of his philosophy and approach. Could be seen that he is not denying the importance of tamas, he is not denying the importance of rajas and only focusing on the level of sattva, but rather he is saying that, every state in the state of evolution is as important as the other one. Okay, and that is why he also considers that they equally contribute to the realization of the ultimate one. So we will have to realize the state of tamas and then come to the state of rajas, and then we can move to the state of sattva. So with this thought, he talks about the notion of freedom, and he says that, that we are invariably free, but the realization of that freedom needs the journey of these paths, where the hurdles will make us realize our strength and ultimate faith in the god. When he argues in this direction, he is also making a very strong point that people should not be led by the leaders into breaking the shackles. They should be doing it out of their own ultimate faith in their mother nation, considering it to be their ultimate duty. So he was neither trying to follow whatever the British were saying, nor to follow what the other leaders were saying, but rather to think about your own self and take this step. And if we look at the notion of freedom, which was promoted by the Enlightenment era in the Western world, that kind of notion he's, sort of critical of, and he says that, with that kind of sense of freedom, you will be only trying to expand your geographical boundaries, and we have seen that how that has translated into imperialism. So he goes against this kind of limited understanding of freedom which is promoted by enlightenment, and he says that, if you think that the British are going doing any justice to you by teaching you some kind of civilization, that is not going to help you. So the idea of justice, which has its basis in rationality and material well-being, can only lead us to expansion of geographical boundaries and imposition of one's ideals on others. On the contrary, according to Aurobindo, the idea of freedom, which emerges out of the spiritual understanding of humanity, will lead us towards emancipation of all while maintaining and recognizing their diversities and differences. So that is how he is trying to once again present a very integrated understanding of the concept of freedom as well, which is combined with the sense of morality as well, that how you also have to be very much concerned about the existence of others as well. And he presents this he presents this at all three levels, which includes individual, nation, and humankind. Okay, so the amalgamation of all these three levels is really very important according to his spiritual understanding of nationalism and his spiritual understanding of freedom as well. But at the same time, if we try to find out that where does the foundation lie of this kind of notion of nationalism and freedom, that comes from his understanding and his belief in the concept of Bharat Mata. Okay, so in order to inculcate the feeling of nationalism in people while holding to the principle of integralism at the philosophical level, he tried to raise the belief and ultimate faith in the concept of Bharat Mata as the mother nation at the religious and political level, and tried to sustain his identity as a Bengali at the personal level. The way he has construed the identity of the mother nation is not, it's it is not inclusive of other views of deities. So in his writings, primarily in Bande Mataram, where he's indulged in invigorating the feeling of nationalism in people, his identity as a Bengali has seemed to be overwhelming and hence quite intimidating sometimes. And he also, that could be seen with his questions when he says that, for what is a nation, what is our mother country? It is not a piece of earth, nor a figure of speech, nor a fiction of the mind. It is a mighty Shakti, composed of the Shaktis of all the millions of units that make up the nation, just as Bhavani Mahisha Mardini sprang into being from the Shaktis of all the millions of gods assembled in one mass of force and welded into unity. So we can see that how his description of Bharat Mata, the mother nation, is loaded with his belief in being a Bengali as well as a Hindu. So that is where he has been questioned by so many, that can we argue that that his philosophy had an integral approach, but his views were very much confined to Bengali Hinduism. So this is the overall concern of the paper, as I said. And I come to this point where I want to argue that this would be a misreading of his philosophy and views. So he was a person who believed that the divine should not be limited to the level of Brahman and should be brought to the level of lives of individuals. He celebrated diversity and never thought that to be a hurdle in the paths of independence of a nation. He announced that, and I quote, the Brahman Pandit and the Mohammedan Maulvi, the caste organization and the trade union, the laborer, the artisan, the coolie at his work, and the peasant in his field, none of these should have been left out of the spheres of our activities. So it is once again he is trying to present a very inclusive notion of how everyone can participate in this entire endeavor to realize nationalism and make our nation free. He considered this to be the strength of our nation, and we should never try to merge one into the other or ignore the particularity of anyone, as Professor Debashish Banerjee has already said that that was never his perspective to go into the sense of modernity, but rather realizing the diversity and differences which were existing. So he also was trying to say that any sort of unity imposed in the name of politics or morality or material benefit will lead to clashes, and that will lead to destruction of the nation. So the only resolution in such crisis could be the belief in religion, in a god, and that is our nation. He has repeatedly said that we should have religious faith in the nation, but that faith could take different forms for different communities. So, though he has promoted Bengali Hinduism as one of his favorite ways for the attainment of freedom of the mother nation, he considered this to be the limitation of one's context and situatedness. So he's also admitting this, that this is my limitation, but my limitation should not be an enforcement on you. Okay, you can develop the notion of nation in the form of the mother or God according to your religious beliefs as well. So he was never ashamed of his beliefs and thought the same for the others. By virtue of being situated in a particular religion, he was more inclined towards his own religion, and was using the ways to get rid of the foreign rule by those means. But this could never be implied from these facts that he was hostile to others. He wanted people to feel proud of their religion and culture. And without the feeling of greatness of one's motherland, it will be impossible to evoke people to make sacrifices for the attainment of Swaraj. So, the British government has been able to put us down by incurring a sense of inferiority in us and by undermining the value of anything associated with us. And they will be more successful in holding back if we also believe in the same thing according to him. So, before attaining national liberalism, he argues that we will have to get rid of this psychological bondage. And in his own words, I quote, we must first ourselves be free in heart before our country is free. To feel proud of one's nation and be devoted to one's motherland is the ultimate duty. No matter whether you adopt the Bengali context or a Muslim context or a Christian context, whatever, but ultimately the target should be to evoke that feeling of respect and divinity for the mother. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Jaiswal. I just wanted to point out we have about 10 minutes max remaining in this panel. So
we should just start with Dipika, I think, immediately. Dipika, can you just keep yourself very brief and within 10 minutes?
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you to the organizers of this conference. Thank you, Professor Puri, Professor Banerjee, for giving me this opportunity to present my work here. So much has already been reflected on Sri Aurobindo, and as we have reflected, through the address by Professor Puri, Professor Banerjee, and Dr. Jaiswal here. My take on reading Sri Aurobindo has been from a slightly different perspective, and that is on to the question of emotions. As the paper has been titled as Sri Aurobindo on the Transformation of Emotions, Reflections on Divine Love and Absolute Devotion. So in my paper, I have this made an attempt to basically demonstrate the significance of emotions in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and practice of integral yoga, wherein I'm trying to examine and look into two specific emotions, which is of love and devotion, which is bhakti, as intrinsic component in the divine essence and its inclusiveness in the practice of Sri Aurobindo. But before we understand what really Sri Aurobindo has to offer us on to the question of emotions, we need to first consider the background, and we need to first understand, that the question of emotions in this whole Indian philosophical system in itself is quite contested and it's very complicated. And that complication is coming from, as we understand, from the Brahmanical ideal of emotionlessness. There is a very, very rich dualism that has been considered, which is in between the empirical self and the transcendental self, which is referred to as Atman and Prandan. It's not really a dualism, but I mean that's how we understand in order to talk about the purity and the absoluteness of the Brahman out there. And emotions have a very negative sort of a connotation, in the study of Indian philosophical tradition because of its primary association with the body. It's the mind-body complex. It's something that kind of devalues our understanding and kind of creates a hindrance to the soteriological approach that we have in the Indian philosophical system. And also that it's primarily argued that all emotional states are experienced by individual are closely connected with the functioning of the body. So in my paper, in order to bring about the sense of transformation of emotions, I've basically presented it at three levels. The first one was about this conceptual background as to where do we place emotions, and the second one definitely is about how Sri Aurobindo would reflect onto the transformation of emotions. So from this negative connotation of understanding emotions, which is connected with the mind-body complex and has a very devalued interpretation, we read in Sri Aurobindo a very positive consideration of emotions, through his idea of talking about divine or divine consciousness. There is a very, very important argument in Sri Aurobindo's work which says that directedness towards the divine is regarded as the only truth in human life. And that kind of focuses the central account of his entire teachings, that is aiming for the spiritual development for one and all. But in his practice of integral yoga, and which is aiming for the self-spiritual development of human nature, we do understand that there are three main essential powers, which is of will, knowledge, and love. And here is the point where love has been defined by Sri Aurobindo as the crown of all beings and its way of fulfillment, that by which it rises to all intensity and all fullness and ecstasy of utter self-finding. So according to Sri Aurobindo, basically the realization of the divine by love would necessarily imply to prepare oneself for the greater possible spiritual fulfillment. And this brings us to understand and reflect on two most important emotions, which is of love and devotion, which are pertinent in the spiritual life, as he points out in his work, that to bring the divine love and beauty and ananda into the world is indeed the whole crown and essence of our yoga. So in my paper, the main section, which is entitled as Emotions of Love and Devotion in the Integral Yoga, which is from the psychic being to the divine life. The practice of sadhana, which is the object of which is to live in the divine consciousness and to manifest it in life, basically has that sense of the realization of the divine through surrender, through devotion, the widening of the consciousness into cosmic consciousness. So based on to this understanding of placing emotion in a very, very positive account, and the placement of emotions over here is not just by inculcating the sense of the idea of emotional being. No, it's about the sense of transformation which needs to be reflected upon, and we need to revisit that sense of transformation in Sri Aurobindo's account that helps us and adds to the spiritual development of our human life altogether. And that is to say, as we read in Sri Aurobindo, that the psychic being that is primarily responsible for the beauty of these emotions of love and devotion and complete surrender to the divine as its essential characteristics. So in order to suggest, so basically the paper has made an attempt to suggest that the emotions of love and bhakti are intrinsic components in his integral yoga that aims for the spiritual fulfillment, as I've just said. And himself, he basically argues that emotions can be categorized as both psychic and spiritual. But then the idea of the transformation of emotions primarily comes on account of its directedness toward this pure, unconditional divine consciousness that we are trying to understand. So with that as the basic base, we need to basically understand over here that the idea of religious emotions can be construed. We can understand, we can reflect upon to the idea of religious emotions from Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and practice of integral yoga. And a similar line of an argument can also be found in our studies of Bhagavad Gita, wherein the study of Bhagavad Gita is highlighting 9 characteristics or lakshana, as we say, of devotion, which again points to the sense of the complete transformation towards the divine consciousness. So, in view of the time constraints that I have, which is limited to only 10 minutes, I think I would like to quote 2 important, stands from Sri Aurobindo's reading that actually directs us to revisit. I mean, it's the idea of revisiting emotions, the idea of rethinking about emotions in Sri Aurobindo's analysis. And I quote here that the love that belongs to the spiritual planes is of a different kind. The psychic has its own more personal love, bhakti, surrender. Love in the higher or spiritual mind is more universal and impersonal. The two must go together to make the highest divine love. And definitely, we cannot exclude the sense of emotions from the integral yoga, the practice of integral yoga, according to Sri Aurobindo. For he says that emotion is necessary in the yoga, and it is the only excessive emotional sensitiveness which makes one enter into despondency over small thing that has to be overcome. The very basis of this yoga is bhakti. And if one kills one emotional being, there can be no bhakti. So there can be no possibility of emotion being excluded from the yoga. So on this note, my paper, my article in this particular book has tried to, and I've just made one small attempt to basically consider this question of emotions and try to revisit the understanding of emotions in the Indian philosophical setup through this reading of Sri Aurobindo, wherein the main aim is to argue, to highlight the shift, the necessary shift on understanding emotions from the negative representation to a more positive, inclusive approach in our study, in our spiritual development of human life. And if I may quote what Professor Puri has just mentioned in her address right away, that it's the aspirational ideal that Sri Aurobindo really puts in. So the idea of granting and the idea of locating emotions and the transformation of emotions, the transcendence of emotions, that becomes very important for us to revisit and reconsider. So on that note, thank you very much. And thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Yes.
I think that was so wonderful from both the speakers. And before that, of course, from Professor Banerjee. And I think we brought together the myriad nature of the philosophical concerns and the multiple ways in which Sri Aurobindo is philosophically available to us. And I think we've really stretched the time to the maximum, and we wouldn't take any more time.